ready? Yeah. Let's do it. Hi everyone, I'm Sophie and welcome back to POVz, the first Gen Z talk show where we bring people from our generation together to talk about important issues from different perspectives. I am so excited to be chatting today with four incredible human beings all about mental health. And before we dive in, I wanted to share that today we're so excited to partner with Movement Genius on our episode today. They are a digital platform all focused on providing live and on-demand classes to help us improve our mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And later today we'll be joined by one of their co-founders, so stay tuned, and we feel lucky to be partnering with them on this particular conversation. So every episode here on POVz, we start with a central question. You ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really excited to hear your thoughts. Should everyone be in therapy?
Absolutely not, in my opinion. And that's because when you think about it, I think a lot of times there are people who are afraid to talk about their feelings and also find different coping mechanisms. Sometimes somebody talking at you, or even if they're trying to support you, in my opinion at least, a lot of times we see that disconnect between actual assistance and then also people that are not just readily available to receive that intake. Maybe going on a walk or maybe just listening to music is somebody else's therapy. So it also relates back to the construct of therapy. I don't think that the traditional therapy where everyone's sitting across from a therapist, everyone should not be doing that, because there's many different ways for people to actually experience their own support.
I honestly agree with that. I don't believe everyone should be in therapy. I think my mind immediately goes to the accessibility issue. It can be more stressful and a worse experience on one's mental health to go through that process in trying to find a therapist. I mean, I spent 8 months trying to find a therapist that was right for me. And I also think that we should acknowledge that therapy is a construct that has been built and a tool that has been built, a resource in the world that we are living in this capitalistic world that has all these stressors and all these things that give us the anxiety, depression, et cetera, to feel that more.
While I actually agree that not everyone should be in therapy, I would say I'm a little bit closer to the other side, because I think everyone can definitely benefit from therapy. I don't think it really matters your situation, because a lot of the time talk therapy is just beneficial in general as a sort of like mindfulness. A lot of the time, patients will come in just because they're going through a more stressful time of their life, not necessarily because they have a diagnosis that requires some sort of care. So I would agree that not everyone should be in therapy, because not everyone will get the serious benefit that it seems to bring about in some people.
Yeah, I definitely don't think everyone should be in therapy. And going off of your point, I actually think sometimes therapy can be harmful when therapists are not like culturally competent, especially coming from like, if you're a Black, Indigenous person of color, if you are talking to a white therapist who doesn't understand where you're coming from, and they're trying to really give you advice and insight from a very white-centered perspective, you're not going to feel connected to them. So I think that therapy is kind of like dating, and I feel like most times people treat it as a one-size-fits-all like approach, and it's not, and it shouldn't be. And I think that, especially from a BIPOC perspective,
I agree. There's not a one-size-fits-all, and I don't by any means think that everyone should be in talk therapy. Like everyone can find different alternatives, but I do want to say that I think I'm the yes on this couch. I know you're giving me a look, but obviously I'm open to learning, and I'm obviously uneducated to some degree. I'm not a mental health advocate per se, but I think the concept of therapy maybe in my mind should more be framed as mentorship. But I feel like for a lot of young people, they don't have someone to go to even process what's happening in their day-to-day lives. So I would love to find a solution where maybe it's not that everyone should be in therapy, but I'd love to find alternatives where young people feel like they have a space or a place they can go to voice what they're struggling with or going through, to find the right resource. And I'm such a believer that if we can process more about what we're going through and what experiences we've had, even kind of like what we've done today, we would be so much better off in being able to meet people where they are. I think it has to start from within.
Yes, I can see the analogy you make, but at the same time, it's that fear of judgment, exactly like Jasmine says. What we see a lot of times is, unless you have those lived experiences, like for me in the military, right? If I talk to you, no matter how much you sympathize with me, you have no idea what we go through. Totally. And it is that same understanding of when you're talking to somebody, if they don't look like you, if they don't have those lived experiences like you, it's just, for me, it's very counterintuitive. You're not getting the support you need because that person really probably does care, but they have no way to relate to you on any lived experience.
I actually totally disagree with this.
Okay, well, good morning.
From a clinical perspective, most of the time your therapist will not be able to sympathize with every single piece of your perspective, whether that be ethnically, like racially, or from a particular type of lived experience. But something that they can do is challenge the beliefs in a way that will make a serious difference. The psychologists I worked with were mostly seeing military patients. Like most of the time they were sent from the VA to get specialized testing in mental health. And for situations like PTSD, it's actually not better to have the sympathizing experience because, you know, having sympathy, that's great in some regards, but it's not going to necessarily fix the issue, especially in the issue of PTSD. It is something that can be legitimately solved. You can completely get over PTSD with a certain amount of care. It does get to a point where it becomes a choice that maybe when exposed will help you actually get to a place where you can move on.
Okay. I agree to a certain extent. And I'm sorry, I just feel like there's also the extra labor sometimes of like having to teach someone what it's like to be coming from this background that should be basic knowledge. You know, when you're providing care for people from a range of experiences, I feel like you shouldn't have to explain what it's like to be a person of color in a whitely dominated society. Like, I feel like that should not be labor that you have to do in therapy where it's not supposed to be a harmful environment, and sometimes it can be. And I know what you're talking about is obviously really different, right? You're talking about PTSD in a very different format, but just like as a general, I think. Yeah. Sorry.
No. I mean, I was going to say, I totally hear what you're saying. And I agree that from a clinical perspective, there are tools, mechanisms, approaches, right, that obviously are proven to work and can work with everyone. I mean, I've been in therapy since 2018. So I am pro therapy in a lot of ways, especially with the people in my life. Like if a friend were to come to me, I would say, please go to therapy, try it out. But I say it with try it out because I recognize that although these tools exist, although the science and research shows that they work, at the same time, as Jasmine's saying, I think unless you are of color or unless you are in the military, there are these very nuanced experiences that, depending on that therapist's, that clinician's experiences, could very much dictate your personalized experience of what therapy feels like. Like, we have to also remember that there's like all the health determinants, right? All the public health determinants that contribute to one's state of being. And so that's also why I think that therapy also is a very individualized approach to addressing mental illness. But I think that we also need to talk about the systems approaches. And I think that even though you said yes and Jasmine said no, I actually think you're in the same ballpark. Because Sophie, you said, yes, everyone should be in therapy, but then you spoke about mentorship, right? You spoke about these other avenues. That's sort of what Jasmine was saying, in my opinion, where it's like tapping into community, finding community solutions, right? Are there community programs? Are there mentorship programs? So I'm kind of seeing like the alignment between all of you. And I think that that's kind of where I'm shifting, where my mind goes to is like the public health landscape and all the other factors that are important to take into consideration as to why I have like a strong no now.
Absolutely. And that's why I love conversations like this, because I think in hearing your stances, I'm actually even better understanding my own. Like, I know we talk about breaking the echo chamber, but in so many ways, even hearing both of your perspectives from the POC point of view, I understand why it's so important to be in a safer space with someone who can understand your lived experiences. So I think even in hearing you speak about this, I'm realizing that maybe what I actually believe is that we should have some sort of baseline mental health education introduced into school so that young people at younger ages at least know that that is a solution or an option, or that there are different ways to address your own mental health needs, where I think I saw that gap in my own education. It was something that wasn't broached at all. And now as we see the conversation of sex ed coming into play, I don't know, I think it could be helpful to even just know for young people that the option is available to them. Do you think mental health education should be mandated? What's your stance on that?
Yes. Yeah. So I work in mental health. We took our company and completely shifted it towards the youth mental health space in the last year and a half because of this reason. But how do you push and mandate mental health when you can't even make people in schools feel accepted for being and looking like who they are still? Mental health education is so important because you're teaching people that therapy, the traditional format, might not be for you, but look how many other mechanisms there are, which is why we built our company, because finding different ways to educate and give them solutions that are alternatives, I think is humongous. And to your point in the military, it's that same deviation of like PTSD and also things that soldiers struggle with. The VA's failing them because there's still 17 suicides on average a day with service members, and the VA has barely created any mechanisms. So not only mental health and education, but I think educating these overlooked populations in general on what resources are available to them, plus 3,000.
I also think that when it comes to basic mental health education, right? So just like self-care, and, you know, talking about movement and how that's intertwined with mental health, just things of that nature, that is really important because
100%.
truly like growing up, I think we can all agree about that.
Yeah.
Because like growing up, you know, the mind-body connection, the gut-mind connection, that was never spoken about, right? Like I was so excited to get McDonald's every day if I could, you know, like, but not knowing what that could do to me, right? And not knowing how that could play into just like how I felt. So I think that's what I think should be included. And I think that would be a great opportunity for like our earlier conversation to introduce young people to clinicians in therapy in a way of like, you know, bring in a clinician to talk about how they would help you, to like show face and be like, hey, like, I'm a therapist. This is what I could do for all of you. This is not a solution for everyone, but I would love to be there for you. This is how you can sign up. I think that'd be a great way to introduce like mental health education and introduce therapy as like you said, a tool that still requires work, but is a tool nonetheless, a resource, a person that can support that journey of yours.
I think what's important is like you're teaching kids to think like it's okay to have emotions that may not necessarily make you feel great. Right? It's like, what does that really look like? What does that mean? And how do we deal with that? Do we talk to friends? Do we talk to your parents? Like, do you talk to teachers? Like, I feel like that's more important than actually being like, this is what depression looks like. This is what anxiety looks like. For younger kids, they're not going to understand what that means. So yeah, I definitely agree with what I think you both are saying.
We have so much to talk about. Let's take a quick breather and we'll be right back.
Hey, it's Bella Santos from the Conversationalist community. Thank you so much for watching our POVz episode on therapy. The best part about TC is that we want to hear everyone's points of view, including yours. Just text the word therapy to 1-877-222-1119 to get access to all things TC, and we hope to feature you on a future episode. See you next time!
Lovely.
That's impressive.
That was great.
Welcome back to the POV show here. I'm Sophie Beren, reporting from New York City.